Mel, how many people are we expecting today?
Oh, I did check. I think it's about 30.
Okay.
Okay, are we good to go?
Yep.
Okay.
Hi, guys. We're starting to see some people come into the room, which is absolutely fantastic. We're just going to give everyone just a few minutes just to get into this meeting room, if that's okay. Doesn't take us long, but very quickly I can see the number of participants ramping up rapidly, which is fantastic to see. So just while we wait, first of all, to say thank you all very, very much for coming in to giving up your lovely, I'm looking out the window, I currently have a big box beside me to shelter me from the sun. So thank you very, very much for giving up your lovely sunny Sunday afternoon to come and talk to us about making sure that the Heatons is as safe as possible. So this is day 2 of the first ever Sustainable Living in the Heatons Climate Action Festival. Just while we wait for a few more people to join in, I thought I'd just tell you about a few more events coming up in the programme. So straight after this session at 4:15, we've got Wildlife Detectives, really exciting way to find out about wildlife in the local neighbourhoods. Yes, we may live in the Heatons, but we've got so much wildlife on our doorstep. Find out more. Next weekend, we've got loads of stuff about your home and what you can do to make it more energy efficient. This will save you money and will save carbon, which is fantastic. So it's a real win-win situation. Also next weekend, we've got sessions on sustainable shopping and what you can do to support the local independent shops and also then reduce your carbon footprint at the same time. And just remember, all of these now, because of COVID, everything is on Zoom, which means we can never run out of space. So tell all your friends, tell your family, get them online, get them signed up to see what they can do to reduce your carbon footprint. The full programme can be seen at slheatons.org/Heatons-Climate-Action-Festival. And I think that's, we're now 2 minutes past. I'm going to say, shall we get started? So this session, Shared Heatons equals Safe Heatons. So I'm Sarah McClelland, I'm the chair for today, and we're very, very lucky to have 3 speakers for us. So we've got Rod King from 20's Plenty, Andy Howard who is involved with the B Network at Transport for Greater Manchester, and Faye Drinkwater. So the first 2, Andy and Howard, they're going to be talking about infrastructure. So what can we change within the Heatons area to make it safer for people to walk and cycle? Then Faye will be talking about TfGM and her role to encourage people to cycle safely as well. Loads and loads of really good information on that. And that's from the beginners through to the most experienced, as well as access to bikes and travel planning. So how can you plan to get around, and also making sure that we're traveling by public transport as safely as possible. So if we can just go on to the next slide, please. So we've got to cover the housekeeping notes. I'm afraid to say you're all on mute, and you all will be for the duration of this session. Only our speakers and panelists are able to speak. Questions, we love questions. Please can you send them through to us? If you go down to the bottom of your screen, you should have a little pop-up which says Q&A. Put your questions in there. We should have some time at the end to go through those questions. If they're for a particular person out of one of the panelists, please do just put the name in as well. Unfortunately, if we run out of time, though, we will be doing a follow-up. We'll send out an email in the coming weeks with the answers to those questions as well. So do put them in there, and we'll rattle through as many as we can today. Separately then, we don't have any polls in this one, so that's okay. The chat is for commentary as well. So you have a chat function, which is to the right of the Q&A. So please go into the chat. If you've got some ideas, some suggestions, something that's brilliant, something that's terrible, please do tell us about it. Let's get as much information shared as possible. And of course, the most important thing is that this session will be recorded. It will also therefore be available on YouTube in the coming weeks. So thank you all very, very much. So just to reconfirm, the Heatons Climate Action Festival. The aim of this is to give people ideas on how you can change as an individual and also within the local community to help support the climate and support our local businesses and live in a more sustainable fashion. Sustainable living in the Heatons has been in existence for 10 years. There's a real frustration that sustainability is being talked about but not much action, and we want, as part of this festival, for people to be able to walk away with ideas as to what they can do to reduce their carbon footprint and live a more sustainable lifestyle. So there is change out there, and there is lots of things happening. So we need to make sure that we are pushing. So why it says about political leadership, we need to be pushing upwards to say, we want you to, the people who are responsible for us, such as our political leaders, we want you to take action. We want you to deliver a better environment for all of us. Next slide, please. Sorry, there's a slight delay between what I can see and what you guys can see. So apologies if I'm slightly behind. So why are we doing this? Really is to answer that big question, what more can I do? What can I do as a member of the Heatons community? And that's what we want to address through this today. So this one is all about transport. How can you get involved in more active transport, either yourself or getting involved in the discussions on the active neighbourhoods as well. So we're going to go over to Rod King to start. Rod King has been talking about safer streets, so it's talking about 20's plenty, so 20-mile-per-hour areas, and he'll talk about where they already exist, what the benefits are of them, methods, so how we can implement 20's plenty zones, and of course how we can keep the speeds down, hopefully without introducing speed bumps all over the place, and also then how you as the audience can help to make our Heatons roads safer. So over to Rod King.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon, so thank you. First thing I'd perhaps say, I'm the founder and campaign for 20's Plenty for Us. Just a little note, when I moved to Manchester in 1980 something, I think, I actually lived for 4 years on Clifton Road in Heaton Moor. So yeah, I know the Heatons reasonably well. Before I go, I always start presentation by saying I'm not really trying to tell you what to do, but maybe I can talk about what other people are doing, and if that gives you some ideas about what you could do as well, that's great. Some ideas perhaps to think about as we go through the presentation. First, how do we share equitably and safely the public spacings between buildings that we call streets? Another thing is how do speed limits question our values, rights and justice which we have in society? And I guess is an urban speed limit of 30 miles an hour, which was pulled out of the air in 1934 with no evidence or reasonableness, right, appropriate for the 21st century community needs. So we're a national UK voluntary organisation. We support communities who want lower speeds for residential streets. And what we mean by that is a 20-mile-an-hour default on streets. It means what we call total 20. So it's 20 miles an hour across the whole authority, unless it's decided that there should be a higher speed. It's not speed limits, and it's exceptions determined by the local authority, in which your case, of course, is Stockport. It's very much retrofitting communities for active travel, and it's importantly community-led, but establishment endorsed, and that's why it's mandatory. And I guess the thing is, yes, we want to transform the way our urban and village roads are shared. So we were formed in 2007, and now we have nearly 500 local 20's 20 or Love 30 campaigns in kilometre per hour countries in UK, Ireland, Australia, USA, Canada. And we do all of that with just 1 day a week professional staff. And I think that's really our whole campaign, is about empowering local communities to campaign. And what I call campaigning is really helping politicians do the right thing. And I think you'd agree, quite often our politicians do need quite a lot of help, but we can get there. And in fact, a third of the population are now living in towns where there is a total 20 policy. And that's really great, and it shows the power of campaigning. It's very much moved lower speeds into the mainstream of transport planning and urban development. And we're pleased that we've been acknowledged as a catalyst in that change with a number of awards. Now, you're probably wondering, do we mean 20-mile-an-hour zones or limits? Well, actually, there's not a lot of difference between the two now, because 20-mile-an-hour zones only need one physical calming device. So, but what I will talk about is the difference between physical calming, where people put in speed bumps, and signs and engagement. And there are differences here. You know, putting in physical calming is very much about communicating with drivers through buttocks and spines. It's a discomfort sort of communication. And, you know, one of the things that you actually, the message that gets across, it's here only. You only need to slow down here, which is where we put these speed bumps in. It can promote acceleration between the calming devices. And you've all seen drivers going along and slowing down for the speed bumps and then accelerating between them. It's around about 50 times the cost of putting in signs. And that means that when you actually look at the cost effectiveness in terms of miles per hour reduce per mile of road per £1,000 spent, it's about 7 times less cost effective than not having physical calming, but instead having a wide 20-mile-an-hour default. And the fact is that if you have a 20-mile-an-hour zone, which is quite isolated and small, then it endorses going faster everywhere else. So, you know, that's an issue which there is with very localized schemes. If you do signs and engagement, 20-mile-an-hour limits with just the repeater signs or the 20-mile-an-hour roundels on the road, then it's very much about hearts and minds. It's very much about social norming that 20 is the right speed where you're in the presence of people. You get steadier driver, you get a wide reduction of kinetic energy across the whole network. And that's the big advantage, because you are setting that social norm that 20 is plenty, where people live, where people play, where people work, where people learn, and where people shop. And it really is becoming the global standard for urban village roads. And it doesn't matter, London, Paris, Edinburgh, Cardiff, so many places, 20 mile an hour or 30 kilometers per hour is becoming that global standard. And here, this is Seattle at the bottom left. We've got Malaysia in the top right. There's Ireland, and in the middle there's Brazil. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, again say that a safe speed on roads with possible conflicts between cars and pedestrians or cyclists and other vulnerable road users is 30 kilometers per hour or 20 miles per hour. And in fact, in August of this year, just last month, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted an endorsement of the Stockholm Declaration, which actually said that this is part of the decade of action, 2021 to 2030, there should be a focus on speed management. And their picked out on speed management was a maximum road travel speed of 30 kilometers per hour in areas where vulnerable road users and vehicles mix. And I said that already 21 million people live in 20-mile-an-hour authorities in the UK. A few here are featured: Liverpool, Bristol, Calderdale. And you can see the essence of this is communities saying, we want our places to be better places to be. And you know, they're going to be better places if we have a default 20-mile-an-hour limit on our streets and in our city centres. In May 2019, the First Minister of Wales announced a national 20-mile-an-hour default. And Wales is moving forward to set the default speed limit for wherever there is street lighting to be 20 miles an hour instead of 30 miles an hour. And that is making progress. And again, in the Welsh Parliament in July, that was debated and got cross-party support, right, from 90% of the Parliament members. So again, there is strong support for that across parties. So why does it make such a difference? Well, all of these people are liking their 20-mile-an-hour limits, and in repeated social attitude surveys or the National Transport Attitude Survey, there's around about 70% of people say 20 mile an hour should be the speed limit in residential streets. It is hugely supported, right? And so there is a lot of people out there in your communities who, if you ask that question, they will say, yeah, 20 mile an hour is the right speed limit for our residential streets. And I did show a few pictures of children there. One of the big issues is that children are unable to cope with traffic speeds above 20 mile an hour without putting their lives at all. They cannot be relied upon to actually protect themselves if speeds are above 20 miles an hour. Work here in the University of Iowa found that collision rates as high as 1 in 20 for a 10-year-old attempting to cross the road with 20 mile an hour traffic. Again, the critical point is 14-year-old. That's when there's enough reliable cognitive skills and experience in order to cross roads safely with faster traffic. And in the UK, research here found that at vehicle speeds faster than 20 mile an hour, primary age children may not be able to detect the difference in speeds between cars approaching. So again, 20 mile an hour is a key, if like, threshold as to below that speed, children are much more able to protect themselves. And that's why we cannot rely upon children to protect themselves in where we have prevailing speeds getting up to 30 miles an hour. And if we think about it, for the whole of evolution, millions of years, the fastest thing which we've had to cope with is 20 miles an hour. So it's hardly surprising. So again, if you want to see what 30 miles an hour looks like or 20 miles an hour, don't consider it from behind a steering wheel. Crouch down at the side of the street and look at that from an 8-year-old's viewpoint. See what it's like when a bus goes past at 30 miles an hour, or a truck, or a van. Or maybe try walking across the road slowly like an 80-year-old. Feel what it's like to take your time and not being able to sprint across the road. Or maybe what it's like to be disabled. Think about what's going to happen if you've got to cross the road in a wheelchair or some other assistance. And again, not everybody you see has got perfect hearing or sight. So again, these are all things which make it difficult the faster the speeds which we have on our roads. The key point is a community that permits 30 miles an hour on residential streets will never be child friendly. And that is always going to deter physical activity of walking and cycling on those roads. And there's a moral point as well. When does speed become theft? When it's the thing which stops us and our children from walking or cycling on our roads through fear of traffic. We can steal a few seconds to get to our destination, perhaps a little bit earlier, but we've taken away from those people who have a right to walk or cycle on our roads. So just to recap, why set 20 mile an hour limits? There's reduced road danger. In the 40-foot distance, a 20 mile an hour vehicle can stop. A 30-mile vehicle is still doing 27 miles per hour. So it's about being able to stop in time. All the participants having more time and more distance to take avoiding action. And, you know, it's why there's a 6% reduction in casualties for every 1 mile per hour drop in average speed. It reduces emissions. Less aggressive driving reduces acceleration and braking. And also, even just getting up to 30 miles an hour requires twice as much energy as getting to 20 mile an hour. And that's because it's the square of the speed, right, which uses up the energy when we're accelerating. There's less noise, about 3 decibels lower. There's increased road justice and equality, which comes from lower speeds. And of course, it's the foundation for active travel, walking and cycling. So I said, we have nearly 500 campaigns around the country and the world. These are all people who are actually making their places better places to be. We will be delighted if you wanted to set up a 20's Plenty campaign in the Heatons or a one for the whole of Stockport, because of course, if you look at 20 mile an hour and its value-based decision for Heatons, then it is true across the whole of Stockport, which is why we tend to work on a local authority-wide basis to help those politicians do the right thing. And let's hope we can do that in Stockport and the Heatons. Thank you very much for your attention and time.
Hi, Rod. Thank you very much for that. I do love your let's not work through our buttocks. Let's just talk things and get roads improved in a more sensible way. So thank you very much for that. A couple of questions have just come through. I'm very conscious of time, but I just thought I'd ask these ones just because I think they're really relevant to now. So one of the questions asked is, do 20 mile per hour limits increase emissions as cars are going more slowly? Are you able to address that one?
No, there's no evidence that they increase emissions at all. When you're looking at an urban environment, most of the emissions come from acceleration. As I said, you require twice as much energy to get to 30 as to 20. There was some work done by Imperial College London for the City of London, and they looked at cycles of 20 mile an hour and 30 mile an hour from motor vehicles. And they actually found some reductions for diesel vehicles. And on balance, the view is that 20 mile an hour limits certainly do not increase emissions at all.
Superb. And just while you're talking, I just did the quickest calculation for Heaton Moor Road, which I think most of the attendees will know. It's quite a long road, very busy, very congested. And I just did a very quick calculation. If we went from 30 to 20 at all times, it would only increase our journey time along that road by less than a minute. So less than a minute to actually have a real positive impact.
But actually, in practice, it's much, much less, of course, because a lot of the time on Heaton Moor Road, cars cannot get up right to 30 mile an hour for the whole journey. So in practice, we find that actual journey times really don't change very much at all when you change from a 30 mile an hour limit to 20 miles an hour.
Right, fantastic. There are some more questions coming in for you, but just being conscious of time, I will hold them till the Q&A at the end, if that's okay. If we don't have time to go through them all, we will be sending a follow-up email. But for now, I'd like to move on to Andy Howard, who's from Transport for Greater Manchester. He's key in the B network, and one of his roles is involved in the Heatons active neighbourhoods and what might happen locally, and also about the government announcements for COVID to help us with physical distancing as well. So if we can pass over to Andy, that'd be awesome.
Hello everyone, hope you can hear me. We do say, don't they, in show business, don't work with children or animals, but I think you could possibly include the internet with that as well. But we seem to be working okay here, which is great. My name's Andy Howard and I work at Transport for Greater Manchester in the team that looks after walking and cycling infrastructure. And my role really is to work with the local authorities in Greater Manchester to help them to design and deliver the B network. So as you're probably aware, we've got the Mayor's Challenge Fund in Greater Manchester, 160 million to start to build the B network. And the B network includes active neighbourhoods. In fact, they're one of the kind of key building blocks of it. Active neighbourhoods are sometimes called filtered neighbourhoods or low traffic neighbourhoods. So this talk is a little bit about active neighbourhoods and what they might look like, and the B network. and also what might be going on in your local area. And also, I'm going to just touch on very briefly a couple of consultations that are going on nationally, which you may well be interested in. Next slide, please. So, why have I got this pair of jokers up? Well, just to help to try to explain a little bit about what an active neighbourhood might be like, I want to try a little exercise here. What I want you to do is, I want you to imagine that you're moving house to a new area, and you're giving Kirsty and Phil a brief as to what you would like the street that you're moving to be like, and the area that you're moving to be like. And what are the sorts of things that you might be looking for in a new area? What is it that you'd be telling Kirsty and Phil to go out and get you? Now, I'm talking about the street and the area, so it's nothing about the house having a hot tub or a garden big enough to graze a horse, or an ensuite or anything like that. It's about the neighbourhood. So in my head, if I was money no object and I was thinking about this sort of thing, what I'd be thinking about is, a quiet street-lined tree. Sorry, let's try that again. A quiet tree-lined street, nice and shady and cooler in summer, and lots of green, very relaxing. Where, okay, maybe everybody can drive to the house, but where the road outside is not dominated by traffic. Where my boy could go out when he's a bit older, he's only 2, where he could go outside and play in the street safely, and where you could walk to the local shops. They're within a reasonable amount of distance, and your route to get there is quiet and pleasant, so much so that you'd actually want to do it. You'd want to go by foot rather than another mode of transport. Where perhaps if there are busier roads along the route, you've got crossings where you want them to get you there, in the shortest possible distance without going on a major dogleg. So that's the sort of thing that I'm thinking about, places where there's a bit more greenery around, where there's less traffic, where there's space to socialise outside with your neighbours, where kids can play. And that's very much the kind of vision of what a successful active neighbourhood might look like. Could we have the next slide, please? And crucially, it's somewhere where people feel comfortable walking and cycling. So, why have I got the Adrian Mole diaries up there? Well, Adrian Mole, I think if you've ever read it, bemoaned the fact that he lived on a cul-de-sac. So perhaps an active neighbourhood might not have been for him. But that was back in the 80s, and things have changed maybe. An active neighbourhood, though, is about retrofitting an area to try to make it more like that kind of vision that I described earlier. It's about what we might want to change. And change, as we all know, can be painful. Not everybody necessarily shares our vision of what an active neighbourhood might look like. But let's start with a kind of an inverse of that description that I gave of an active neighbourhood. What about if we were talking about somewhere where it's already a lovely quiet street? Perhaps it's a cul-de-sac in some sort of leafy suburban part of Stockport. And what about if we were talking about opening up that cul-de-sac for through traffic so that people could drive to the houses a bit quicker, and then maybe would raise the speed limit so they could get there a bit quicker too, even if it was a bit more noisy, and then maybe would pave over the grass verges and cut down the trees so that we could have some more on-street parking, because that would be more convenient for people. Do you think people would go for that? Is that what people would look for? Would they want to go backwards to that sort of a scenario? I don't think many people would. So the thing to hold on to is what that vision is like, your area could be like in the future, and it's about working towards that. And the key to doing that is through engagement. So delivering the active neighbourhoods as part of the B network, it's very much a bottom-up approach. So instead of the more traditional approach, which is for a local authority to design a scheme and then to try to sell it to the local population through a consultation, you don't do that. You flip it on its head and you start by asking people, what is it about your local area that you don't like, or what do you like about it, and maybe you want to see more of. And then by getting people's opinions on what their areas is like, it can help to inform what the interventions are that you might need in order to make their area better. So it's about actively going out and seeking people's opinions on their local neighbourhood. And you may be aware that there's an engagement exercise going on at the moment in the Heatons for the Heatons Active Neighbourhood. And you can access that via Commonplace. So I'll send a link round, or get a link sent round after for that. But it's very much about starting with a blank sheet of paper and asking people almost to start to design their own scheme. Next slide, please. So the Bee Network in Greater Manchester is somewhere around 2,000 kilometres long. It was put together with the engagement of local people, so very much in the same way that an active neighbourhood is. People drew where they wanted the routes to go, and that's the basis of the network. In Stockport alone, there's several hundred kilometres of network. Now, the Bee Network really is about making use of the parts of the highway network which are already okay for walking and cycling, and just putting in point interventions where they're really needed in order to link them together. And then occasionally on the more major corridors where it's really needed, kind of major interventions, a bit like Wilmslow Road. Could we move to the next slide, please? So in terms of schemes to deliver the Bee Network in Stockport, Stockport's got something like £27 million worth of schemes, £27 million out of that 160 million Mayor's Challenge Fund. And there's, I think, 14 different schemes, including 2 active neighbourhoods in Stockport. There's probably a 3rd active neighbourhood in the offing as well. Next slide, please. And in the Heatons itself, the schemes that we have here, you can kind of see the green line running diagonally across there. That's the Heaton Cycle Link, which links the Transpennine Trail over towards Heaton Mersey and East Didsbury to the Fallowfield Loop further up to the north. And again, that's very much kind of, for the most part, is point interventions about linking together bits of neighbourhood roads that are already okay for cycling and walking. And of course, in yellow, you can see the outline of what could be the extent of the Heatons Active Neighbourhood. Down towards the bottom of the screen, near the M60, there's a new bridge proposed to link to Stockport Town Centre over the M60 in Great Edgerton Street. And if we move on to the next slide. So there are a couple of things going on nationally which may be of interest. National government's got a couple of consultations which are ongoing at the moment. The first one is on the Highway Code, where they're looking to reinforce the hierarchy of users, which, to be honest, already exists, placing the most vulnerable at the top to remind all road users of that, and also to remind road users that have the greatest potential to cause harm that they also have the greatest responsibility as well. There's stuff in there about clarifying right-of-way for pedestrians, but particularly at junctions at side roads. So the change there is that motorists would be encouraged to give way to pedestrians that are waiting to cross, not just those that are actually crossing. So it's a little bit stronger in that regard. And also reminding drivers about treating cyclists as vehicles at junctions and giving way to them as they would vehicles at junctions, which unfortunately not all drivers seem to do. There's also a consultation about pavement parking and about introducing measures to make it easier for this to be stopped where it's a problem. So again, I'll get some links circulated around, but if you're interested in responding to those consultations, you can do. I'd suggest it might well be something that you're interested in. So sort of the things that, if they were implemented, changes were implemented, and if people supported them, would make it a little bit easier, to make better active neighbourhoods. I'll also just touch on 2 other documents that have been launched recently. The first one is Local Transport Note 120, which is effectively it's a design manual for walking and cycling, but one which is launched by the government to replace an old document which has been around for about at least 8 or 10 years. I've got to say it's one of the strongest worded documents I've ever heard, national documents on walking and cycling, and it does propose a set of standards for walking and cycling infrastructure, which would be pretty radical. But crucially, the second document there, Gear Change, is a policy document, and it's one which requires all local authorities and combined authorities to make sure that they design cycle infrastructure in accordance with LTN 120. That's something that we've never really had nationally. And it's got teeth as well. So any funding which is awarded to local authorities could be subject to clawback from central government. They could come and take it off local authorities if they implement schemes that are not up to standard. So things are changing, and we're slowly getting to a better place, really. You might want to go away in your leisure and have a look at some of those things. They might well be of interest to you. And if you could move to the last slide, please. So the challenge then to yourself is to think about making a trip somewhere in your neighbourhood, as it is at the moment. So you could either actually go out and do this, of course, or if you feel more comfortable, just think about a trip that you know well enough that you could do it without moving from your own home, and just think through that trip. So a short trip on foot or by bike, maybe it's taking your kids to school, maybe it's walking to the local shop, maybe it's accessing your local park or healthcare or something like that, but a journey that you'd make locally. And ask yourself these questions, are there any barriers? Are there things which make it feel difficult? Would you feel safe throughout that trip? And generally, what would your feeling be as you make it? Is it the sort of thing that makes you feel anxious or angry or uncomfortable? What could be better about that trip? What do you like about it? Because it might be that there's parts of it that are really good. And would you actually, did you enjoy that trip? Would you choose to make it if you didn't really have to? So have a think about that kind of a trip. Have a go at it, and then go online to the engagement exercise for the Heatons and start populating the map. I'm sure lots of you already have, and that's the chance to. It's a good way to think about the sort of feedback that you might want to give about your local area and what it is that you like about it and what you might want to change. So that's the last slide, I think. Move on to the next.
Thank you, Andy. That was great. There's so much consultation happening at the moment. There is so much. Are you okay just to take a couple of questions just before we move on to Faye? Just because, again, I think these are really pertinent to your section. One of them is Heaton Moor Road. I can almost hear the sigh across the Heatons talking about Heaton Moor Road. The question is basically that they understand that the council are planning to put in some temporary calming and other methods in the area. Are you able to confirm a little bit more detail about what they are? The traffic lights are already in.
I'm not too close to all of the detail. I know that there's a route that's been partially or even wholly implemented at the moment, including that temporary set of traffic lights near Heaton Chapel Station, I think it is. So the purpose of that is about providing the aim is to provide a parallel route to the A6, probably most useful for people who work in Stockport town centre and are travelling south towards that. So it takes it's a slightly meandering route, but it roughly parallels the A6. The set of traffic lights at Heaton Chapel Station is to get you across Heaton Moor Road itself, which can be, I know from experience, can be pretty busy. The detail that there are other measures that Stockport Council are looking at as well. I'm not particularly close to the detail, but they are looking at things like trying to slow down traffic in local centres. Perhaps in some cases they're looking at temporarily suspending parking to give some more space outside shops for queuing and for safe passing for people that are walking, that sort of thing. I think there's a lot of that that's going on across Stockport at the moment. There's several local centres, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Heaton Moor is one of those.
Fantastic. On the other question, just while I've got you, Muldeth Road, there's the planned works for the roundabout down there. How can we support such schemes? Is the Heatons Commonplace map the best place? Should we be contacting our MPs, councillors? Who should we be going to say that we support them?
All of the above, definitely. So yeah, certainly if you support that sort of thing, go and tell your probably your local councillors are some of the most important people in the first instance to talk to, but certainly your MP as well. I think if you ask your local councillors what their mailbag normally consists of, it's probably normally, let's say, negative things. If you want to proactively go and talk to your councillors and say, we like this sort of thing, we'd like to see more of it, I'm sure they would be absolutely delighted with your positivity. The commonplace map, certainly. The map itself, though, is not about consulting on a specific scheme. It's more the step before that. So it's about basically saying, are there any problems here? If there are, point them out to us, and then what we'll do is we'll go and design a scheme which solves them for you. But yes, certainly go online to Commonplace and have a look at the map there and leave some feedback.
Fantastic. So you heard that. Let's get talking to people as much as possible. Thank you very much, Andy. We are, I'm going to say on time, but we are slightly behind, I acknowledge. So I'm going to go on to Faye now. So Faye's here to talk about cycling training. Unfortunately, we've got a slight issue with Faye's video. So she will be speaking. We'll be able to hear her, but we won't be able to see her, unfortunately, today. So I'll pass over to you, Faye. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. Hope everybody can hear me okay, and apologies that you don't have any visuals in terms of me on a video. A tough act to follow, I think, following those two great presentations that we've just heard from. So we've definitely heard about how we can make our safe space in terms of lowering the speed limit on our roads. Andy's spoken about how we can make our physical infrastructure better for cycling and walking. And I'm going to now talk about the tools that we can use to make us feel more confident when cycling. So I'm going to be talking about cycle training and journey planning with TfGM. Next slide, please. Our cycle training at TfGM, we have a really great series of different courses that are available through Transport for Greater Manchester. So I'm going to go through each one of them and have a similar format. So I'll talk about who's it for, the kind of things that you would learn when you attend the course, and just a little bit of a snapshot of a quote that we've received from feedback from people who've attended the course. So going back to basics then, we've got our Learn to Ride course. So who would it be for? So the Learn to Ride, as the name suggests, would be that if you are new to cycling or you haven't ridden for many years, so it might have been when you were a child and you've dropped your bike when you were younger and you've not picked one up again since. So it really is for the beginner cyclist, and we do look at basic skills such as getting on and off your bike, how to change gear, and checking your bike before you ride, so it's safe and you'll feel confident when about to set off. So it's free, our Learn to Ride, and you can just see here some feedback that we received about somebody one of our cycle instructors helping someone's nephew and giving them the confidence to ride a bike. I think it's something that we often take for granted, but there's a hell of a lot of people who can't ride a bike, and it's fantastic that there is a course there that can help people get on two wheels. Next slide, please. Okay, road rider ready. So this might be that you can ride a bike and you feel comfortable changing the gears, stopping and starting, etc. And you've got your sights on going on the road, but you just don't feel quite confident to be able to go on that journey yet. You still want to, you tend to veer towards the pavements because you just don't feel safe. So Road Rider Ready is a session that we run in a group. So it would be in a traffic-free environment such as a park. So here's an example at Whitworth Park in Manchester. And you'll learn as a group, and it's a very comfortable environment where you can ask questions and really understand how you can have a presence when you're on the road, and how to navigate safely. So, you know, being able to indicate and things like that, to be able to build your skills and confidence when cycling on the road. Okay, next slide, please. The one-to-one cycle training. Now, all of the sessions that we provide are excellent, but this one in particular, I just think is fantastic. So it's our one-to-one cycle training, and as it sounds, it's a one-on-one session. So a cycle instructor will come to somebody's house or somebody's place of work, and they will cycle with the participant and be able to give them the skills and the confidence that they need. So they'll talk to you, they'll say, what is it that you want from this session? And somebody might come back and say, oh, well, I'd really like to start cycling to work, but there's a few major junctions that I don't feel comfortable navigating by myself when I'm on my bike. Can you help me with that? And the instructors will cycle with the individual and be able to go through step by step the issues at some of these junctions that might have prevented somebody from cycling to work, for example. So it's excellent for really, if you feel uncomfortable being in a group setting, for example, and you want to be able to just say to somebody, look, I don't feel confident. It's fantastic to be able to have that support. And we do have a series of, so you can have up to 3 sessions. So you can have 3 one-hour sessions, or you can have one long 3-hour session. And again, it's a fantastic service because it's free. It's so good. I put my mum on it. She loved it. Next slide, please. Thank you. The family cycle training. So this is the newest edition cycle training at TfGM. So as the name suggests, it's for the whole family. So often people have approached us and said, oh, we'd really like to start cycling as a family, but we just don't feel the roads are safe to be able to facilitate a bike ride going on some of the key roads. So this cycle session shows you how to cycle protectively with your children, and give them the confidence as well to be able to cycle in a group, and to be able to look out for things like the dreaded car door coming out potentially and knocking you off your bike, or people doing a left-hand turn and not being accommodating to the cyclist. So it's a great activity to do with the family. It's free, and again, it's a session that if you did the session and then you felt like, oh, that was really good, but there's still some things that we'd like to touch up on, that's something we could certainly accommodate. Next slide, please. So I feel quite embarrassed to say this, but I've been cycling for about 7 years, and I only learned how to fix a puncture last year, and I did go on this course. It's £5. It's for people who, like myself, have always ridden with puncture-proof tyres in fear of getting a dreaded flat. But I just thought, this is ridiculous. I work in cycling. I need to be able to know how to fix a puncture. So I did it, and now I don't know what I was worried about. It's so easy. The course was great. The people were really supportive. It was nice to meet other people on the course who also had a similar tale to tell about, you know, just feeling like they wanted to do longer distances by themselves, for example, but were always a little bit apprehensive of getting a flat and then being stuck in the middle of nowhere. What tools to carry, we went over that. Also looking at how to adjust your saddle, handlebars, brakes and gears. So if you're not riding in a comfortable position, then that can have an impact on your posture and make the ride a little bit uncomfortable. So yeah, that I can personally say that that was a great course. So yeah, that was £5. Next slide, please. And on the back of going on the basic maintenance, I did attend the intermediate bike maintenance. I think I do need another session though, because just the gears just confused me a lot. But basically, this is for those people who feel like, yeah, I know how to do the basic things on my bike now, but I want to be able to understand the mechanisms of the bike and be able to replace parts myself. So rather than having to take it to a bike shop, being able to feel confident in fixing up your bike. And it is a brilliant feeling when you feel like you can do something yourself on your bike. You feel like independent, you feel like, you know, you want to learn more. And it definitely takes any of that anxiety away that you might, if you were on a longer cycle ride, you might have if you feel like if something happened, I don't know what I would do. So yeah, it's a brilliant course, and it's £25. And the local one to the Heatons is Sarah Cyclone. And that is just off Hillgate, so not far. In fact, the one that I attended, there were a group of people who knew each other, and I just said, "Oh, how are you part of a cycling club?" And they said, "No, we just go to the Heaton Hops." And we all just said, "Oh, should we go out on a ride one day?" And they formed a cycling club as a result. So definitely good bit of community, I think, in Heaton Hops. Next slide, please. So the cycle training has really been successful during COVID. We've seen an unprecedented amount of demand for cycle training. So these are just some stats that I've put together. So we had 419 registrations this summer, 311 one-to-ones, and 108 families. And this is the stat that I'm so pleased about. But of the one-to-one registrations, 74% were female and 26% were male. Now, some of you might be more familiar than others, but there does tend to be a disparity between the amount of women who cycle and men. And it's brilliant to see that women, you know, we're taking it upon themselves to try and understand what it is that they need to be able to become cycle proficient. And as I've said there about the sessions that we've delivered to date, we ended up doing during COVID, we've ended up doing more cycle training sessions within the past 4 months than we did in 2019 and 2018. So that just is remarkable, and yeah, it's fantastic for our cycle training coordinator. So September and October, we'll return. So we've had some of our cycle training sessions put on hold because of COVID and the restrictions, but we will be resuming services for Learn to Ride, Road Rider Ready, and basic maintenance, and we hope to do intermediate as well eventually in the winter months. So your local park then for Learn to Ride and Road Rider Ready is at Cale Green Park in Devonport. So it's just a short train ride away, and there's also some parking as well on some of the side roads. So the Learn to Ride, you don't have to have a bike, and the Road Rider Ready, you do need a bike for that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so try not to go on for much longer because we've only got 6 minutes. Journey planning with TfGM. So we've got, it's state the obvious a little bit, but things like Google Maps, you know, you just can't go wrong with just some of the more wider generic journey planning tools, which you can, you know, put in which mode of transport you can go in. So you can go on any of these that are put in here, by going on to TfGM's website. The one that I really want to focus on is cycle streets. Next slide, please. So I don't know if anybody's used this tool when trying to plot a journey, but it really is fantastic. So I put in here that I wanted to go from the Heatons into Stockport's town centre. And as you can see, so it gives you the usual turn-by-turn directions. But it also gives you the calories, the CO2 avoided. You can determine which route you'd like to go on based on if you want a quieter route, or if you want to get there a bit quicker, you might go on a more direct route. But obviously, then it has route has very busy sections. So here you can see the information on there. It even goes down to the granular level of looking at the how many traffic lights are on the route. So it really is great. I think if you can check it out, please do. Next slide, please. Just very quickly, so Stockport Town Centre has had some excellent transformations over the past few years with the Stockport Town Centre Access Plan project. And with some recent additions being made for cycling and improving the cycling and walking infrastructure. So as a result of that, we've offered personal travel plans for commuters with additional incentives to get people to sign up. So things such as free bus travel for 7 days for car drivers. And we also have a personalised travel plan for people who are looking to move into the area or within Stockport. So if you're moving into a new house and you want to check what the transport options are, that's a really good tool to be able to use, and you'll get a specific personalised travel plan. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm conscious of the time. Love to Ride. So this is a fun and free online community where you can track your rides, interact with friends and colleagues, and motivate more people to get on their bike. So we've done a bit of promo using our road signs, and it's just an incentive to get more people to cycle. And you can log your rides and see how many other people are doing the same. If you want to find out more information, please go on the Love to Ride website. Next slide, please. Okay, that's the last slide for you. Thank you for listening. Sorry if I rambled on a little bit there. But I think the two bits of information that I'd like you to go away with is, one, please check out our cycle training. There's something for everybody, and they really are fantastic. And the other thing is, please sign up to Love to Ride if you do cycle, because it's great to show what a community there is out there for those people who don't cycle but need a bit of a push and a bit of encouragement. And that's everything from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. Thank you very, very much. And we have literally got 2 minutes left. So we've had some really good questions, and they're really, really good to see. So please just add your questions in. I'm going to be very cheeky. I've been told we're allowed to overrun by 1 whole minute, so we're going to go for it. One question to Andy. There's been flagged up that there's some places like Macclesfield which have some special signposts warning drivers to watch out for cyclists. Would we be able to get some in the Heatons?
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the active neighbourhood, and signage can be part of that. So yeah, absolutely.
How would we get that? Who do we need to speak to? What do we need to do?
Well, if you go onto the Commonplace, that is the first step. The first step is about actually getting the active neighbourhoods going in the Heatons, and that needs to be demonstrated through Commonplace. So if there is a particular issue that you think signage would resolve, that's the place to leave feedback of that nature.
Fantastic. Rod, question for you. Has there ever been a Heatons 20s Plenty campaign that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm afraid I left the Heatons before I started campaigning for 20 mile an hour limits. So why not set one up?
That's okay. Absolutely. I was going to say we've got just enough time just to have a very quick poll whilst we keep talking. A poll's going to appear saying, should we set up a 20s plenty for the Heatons? If you can answer that in the next 30 seconds, that would be awesome. And I'm just going to ask some more questions. Back over to you, Andy. The question coming through, the Heatons cycle link feels like it's an example of marginalising cycling as it's so indirect. How can we get our cycling to be some decent road space? What do we need to do?
Well, the Heatons does look indirect if you look at it as a linear route. But if you look at it at the series of point interventions that it is, what it actually does is it connects lots of neighbourhoods together. So the interventions on the Heatons link are about bridging things like the busy roads, like Moldith Road, like Didsbury Road, or the A6. And when you've done that, sure, you can travel along the shortest route between those interventions as a linear route. But what it actually does is it enables those local short journeys by connecting the neighbourhoods that are within the catchments. So it plumbs together the networks of roads that are already quiet, and that's not just limited to the line that you saw on that map.
That's okay, thank you.
I think if I can come in there, Sarah, I think one of the things is to start off with the aspiration that all roads except for the motorways should be cyclable in Stockport, and that is the approach which you have to take. And really, the cost of putting in infrastructure where you don't have 20-mile-an-hour limits, for example, is to be borne by the motorists to go faster and not have to take care of avoiding cyclists. So you really want to start off with high aspirations, that you want the Heatons and you want cyclable to be cyclable and Stockport to be cyclable on all roads. The idea that some roads are unsafe to cycle on, right, should not be part, I think, of what you're accepting.
That's a really good point. And just to tie us in neatly there, the poll has been revealed, and 100% say 20s Plenty campaign for the Heatons should be started, which is fantastic news. So you've influenced us, Rod. Thank you very much. Big thank you to Andy and to Faye as well. Really good information there. All this information will be on our website, and this will be visible again on YouTube very, very soon. Thank you all for participating. The one final thing I've got to say is do speak to people, speak to your MPs, speak to your friends, speak to your family. Let's get people engaged, and let's get that down. Let's improve our carbon footprint. And I hate to say it, that's all we've got time for. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, thank you.
Bye then.
Bye.